Let's get to it. We've got a couple great guests today. Mike Young, comedian, writer, director. Films include My Man is a Loser and now Stealing Jokes. We'll talk about that. He did that with Mike Rappaport. He's toured with toured with everybody, Chappelle, Rogan, Maniscalco. And then we're going to wrap up and then talk to Curtis Houck, managing editor of NewsBusters. He had a decade of media research at the Media Research Center, analyzing network news and other outlets. And I'll be asking him similar questions to I asked Jimmy Dore about what has happened to journalism. He has frequent appearances out there. He's with the Heritage Foundation for a while. He lives in Alexandria. He will be with us. You can follow him at Curtis Houck, Houck on X. And for Mike Young, you can find him, The Real Mike Young, on X. We'll be right back with him after this. That's interesting. We've never had these problems before. Caleb, you want to jump in here and explain to everybody what be going on here?
Yeah.
And what do we need to do to...
It's all good. I think everything is all good. We can just jump straight to the guest. It just doesn't want to play any of our video packages today, which is fine because that's not the focus of the show anyway.
Absolutely not. I hope they managed to run them. Oh, there he is, Mike Young. Welcome, my friend. You're in Connecticut.
Thanks. I am in Connecticut. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So my first question, I've not spoken to Michael Rappaport in a couple of years, and it was so extraordinary. When did you guys do that movie, the Stealing Jokes?
We did Stealing Jokes about a year and a half ago. We started it, finished it about 10 months ago. And so, but I talk to Michael all the time. You want me to send him a message?
Well, about 18. Yeah, first of all, I miss him. Tell him hi. I'd love to see him. I haven't seen him in a while, but about 18 months ago, he had like severe Trump derangement syndrome. And when the anti-Israel Hamas sort of stuff started coming up, he went completely the other way. And I'm like, I always knew Mike was prone to hyperbole, but this was so bipolar even for him. So does he talk about that? Is he sort of, what is he, what is his take on his transformation?
I say, Rappaport's so passionate that if he does enough studying and finds out he might have been wrong, he's got no problem feeling like he was wrong and just going the other way. He literally has no problem. It's, I know him for years as an actor before this whole, before the whole wild social media thing took off, right? So I brought him in because of his talent as an actor, but I watched this social media thing take off, and he just says what he feels, and he's 100% honest about it. He can't be fake. He doesn't have that fake ability. And he believes what he believes. And when he saw what was going on with Israel, he jumped over and he moved into Mar-a-Lago. So if you want to find him, he's at the pool.
It's wild. It's wild. He's an excellent comedic actor. He's really, and not even comedic. I've seen him in some dramatic stuff too. But what you must not know, if you're not part of the one of the super fans over at Howard Stern, he really got a lot of traction over there going at producer Gary, which he called monkey face and something tooth. I can't remember all the insults he leveled at it, and really went at it sometimes.
So the crazy thing is, I do know that because when we shot My Man is a Loser, which was my first movie he starred in, we went on the Howard Stern show together. I didn't get a single word in, and he had not been on that show forever, and he went in and he started going off on those guys. And next thing you know, the whole marathon took off, and he just started bashing people, getting banned left and right. I'm a fan.
When was this? When was that? Because I'm guessing now that Howard still has Trump derangement, so I'm guessing Michael has difficulty going on the show now.
I don't even know if he's been asked back in like 2 years, but we shot that movie almost 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, he was in He was in the good graces of Howard. They let him in. He went crazy on everybody. Probably since this recent run, he won't be going back unless fantasy football takes over for him. And I have no idea.
Oh my God, that's really funny. I wonder if he's playing
Yeah.
with those guys. So tell us about Stealing Jokes. What is it? Why should we see it? Where can we see it?
So Stealing Jokes is it's the story of 4 comedians that go on the road and they rob the comedy club, because every comic has been robbed by a club at some point in their career. And this was kind of my ode to like every comic who's ever played the road. And so 4 comedians, they hit the road, they get stiffed, they get their money from the club owner. Rappaport owns the club. They got to get him his money back because he's a gangster. And they end up taking down like one of these YouTube stars, you know, sort of based on like how a comedian can blow up in a year off a YouTube clip.
Yeah.
And so they take him down. So it's really my ode to comedy, to comedians, to any comic that's ever been stiffed while playing the road. And, you know, everybody from Chris Rock to Bill Burr, they all have stories about, you know, some random club in a small town, you know, said they had their money and they didn't. And so I always thought, it was always in my mind, like, why do we go on the road and like risk our lives? You know what I mean? But it's okay to not pay us in full. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what, we need to make a movie about this. And so I got lucky and made Stealing Jokes. And I think it's fun.
Where do we
I
see
think you'll like it. It's Amazon, Apple TV, and then it hits theaters February 11th.
Oh, fabulous. Congratulations. Well,
yeah, thanks.
Also, Jeff Dye was up here a couple of weeks ago, so we know Jeff very well. Smart guy, good guy, funny guy. And I misrepresented your social media, and you tell me if I get this right. It's the Instagram that is the real Mike Young, and then the website is MikeYoungLive.com. And then you have the Rock Comedy Tour. Tell us about that.
So Rock Comedy Tour is from the Rock family of companies. It's a sponsored tour. It's a 25-city tour. It's myself, Andy Letterman, Brett Ernst, Ian Edwards. To me, it's all the best comedians, basically the best comics in the country are coming along on this thing. And it's a sponsored tour by Rock, who they also own Rocket Mortgage out of Detroit. I'm a Detroit guy, and they understood that comedy was powerful. They got behind the tour. And we can't afford Bert Kreischer or Sebastian right now, but you know, everybody in the Annie and the Eric Griffin and the Paul Verzi, all those guys that are to me the funniest, best comics are coming in and out of different cities with us. So we're in Richmond, Virginia Saturday. We're in Cincinnati next week, and we got about 13 more dates. So just go to Rock Comedy Tour. You'll find the spot. It's a fun group. Travel with your friends.
Yeah, a good group.
You're lucky.
I bet. So the one thing that I wondered if you could speak to is something I noticed in the depths of COVID that persisted well after that. And I kept actually asking it publicly, is what happened to the comedians? Where are the comedians? Why aren't they making fun of the excesses and the bullshit that we're all living with? We can't even get relief from the comedians to help us feel, as particularly in California, to crawl out from under the boulder that has been rolled over us.
Well, you know what's crazy? I feel like right now you're about to see the wave of comedians speaking their mind fully again. I honestly think COVID hit the comedy community so crazy because it just cut off our money in one day. It just cut off our way of earning a living and so it was kind of traumatic. Not so much in the fear factor of COVID, but more in like, oh man, how are we ever going to like figure this out? You know, we were all on tour. I was on tour, rest in peace, Bob Saget. I was on tour with Bob when the world shut down. So I think it just had a psychological hit that we weren't ready for. But I think you're going to see in the very near future, everybody speaking their mind, really being okay with saying what they feel, you know, is the truth in their own, you know, anti-woke. I mean, if you want to call it that, like, I don't know, it's time to just get back to the core truth of what you feel and be free. But I think there was a minute we were so scared we weren't going to make a living and nobody knew what to talk about. And they didn't want to, a lot of comics didn't even want to admit COVID happened. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting. Even like in the movie world, they're like, you'll hear like, come bring us a pitch, but nothing about COVID. It's almost like let that go as if it didn't happen and move on. There's a weird psychology I can only speak to the comedians, and I know right now is going to be a good time moving forward because the comics are getting their truth back, and they're not afraid anymore.
Well, a lot of them were duplicitous. A lot of them, signed off on a lot of things that were excessive and didn't speak a truth or didn't even sort of address the excesses that were easy to make fun of. I mean, there's a lot to make fun of now, and now we're finding out that this USAID thing was billions of dollars lined up against somebody just saying, hey, I'm not sure the government's making a good choice here, get crushed. And speaking of speaking the truth, you mentioned my friend Bob Saget. It is time to revisit and remind people that was a vaccine death, indirectly. Let's be clear. That was HOT syndrome, which is something we know happens from the vaccine. It happens from COVID too, but it also has happened to the vaccine. I believe we have footage, Caleb, you may want to find, of Heather McDonald, her POT syndrome, when she collapsed had exactly the same thing that happened to Bob, precisely the same thing. And she hit her head in precisely the same way and fractured a skull in precisely the same place. Unfortunately, hers happened in a comedy club in front of a group of people. And unfortunately for Bob, it was a hard bathroom floor where no one was around. After something like that, you feel kind of weird and fatigued. You go lie down, bleed into the brain, and that's that. That's what happened to him. Right. Caleb, do you have that footage?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it right now.
Okay,
but let me ask you something though. Like how, we were only getting information that we were allowed to get. You're a doctor, so like you knew 5 times what the average person knew. You knew what a lot of people maybe didn't know. So like, what were people supposed to think, or how were they to know?
I was attacked publicly and on social media by comedians and other celebrities and things for daring to say, I think this lockdown is going to hurt people. I think we do not have the science to back a mandate for 20-year-olds. We just don't have it. How dare you? Right. You want to kill people. You're a murderer. You got blood on your hands. Here we go. And one of the things that stands out for me after Heather had her event, about a year later, I was with her, I think, on a red carpet, and somebody went, hey, was that you passed out, or I guess that's POT syndrome. We're hearing lots of POTS from vaccine. And she goes, oh, are we allowed to say that now? We can actually talk truth. We can actually say something. We had been so profoundly censored. I think the fact that the comedians were scared and censored wasn't unrealistic. You're right. They were good. They would have gotten skewered. But we should all look at that. Please make fun of it, for one thing, so we can digest it better. And secondly, it was a horrible, horrible chapter of the history of this government and this country, and we should look at it for what it was. It was bad. Here's Heather. Let's play the sound, too, because she's bragging about getting vaccinated.
Yeah, I remember this.
Can we play the sound? Are we allowed to? Whoop,
it's coming.
Oh, you see how show that again, Caleb, because the flop of her head and the occiput is really what got Bob. She's saying, "Oh, Jesus loved me because I got vaccinated. I'm doing God's work, and yeah, it's great. It's great." And then
did shows, meet and greets, never got COVID. Clearly, Jesus loves me the most. Seriously. So nice. So nice.
Oh, and hear that bang on the floor. That was her head. Caleb, Susan, we're revisiting
I know, I'm listening.
Heather McDonald's
Fortunately,
fall.
her son was in the front row and took her to the emergency room.
Yeah, and she called me, and she had a skull fracture. And then when the Bob thing, I was just like, oh, it's the same thing. It just is the same thing. Jason, Heather faked the fainting. Hang on a second. Yeah, Jason. She had a effing skull fracture. An effing skull fracture. You want to, how do you fake a fall that ends in a skull fracture? Asshole. Sorry, I'm not feeling happy about this whole thing.
Yeah.
This whole episode, it's coming back to me so vividly now. I'm like, God, this was an awful thing, and we need to remember it for what it was.
Well, they were laughing. They thought she was kidding.
No, I know that. I know, and I can't blame people for that, of course. But
right, but anybody that saw that. Anybody that saw that, though, if you thought she was faking, you got a problem, right? Like if you thought somebody took a dive, banged her head, fell awkwardly, then you got a real problem.
But then she
like I saw you talking earlier.
Couldn't talk about it. She couldn't talk about it.
I brought that up, that she said.
We had her on our show, but we had to kind of tiptoe around it.
Yeah, you were not allowed to say anything
Back
about
then,
it, which
though.
is so bizarre. Oh, think about that. It's so pathetic.
I know.
We weren't, think about those words. We weren't allowed to talk about it. That should churn in everybody's stomach. Where do we live? What is it? Where is this place?
But who tells her not to talk about it? Like who's the they? You know what I mean? Like they told me not to talk about it. Who says that? Like even as a comedian, agents,
her agents, the media, her publicist. Oh no, you can't. Oh no, you can't do. I mean, they hear that immediately from the representation, and then any little attempt to say anything, like we tried it here, boom, get attacked. Now we're seeing a lot of that was actually from the government. We didn't know that. How could we possibly know that?
Bob Saget because he was America's dad. You know.
Well, listen, Bob also had, he had a lot going on. You know what I mean? He had some other health issues. You know what I mean? It wasn't just maybe the shot. I don't know enough to even say it, but like Bob had some things going on. I toured with him for 10 years. You know what I mean? For him to slip and fall isn't out of the question. And he hit his head on the back so hard that it gave him a black eye in the front.
But right, but that's all. So
the same thing.
Yeah, to fall, people don't fall that way. They don't slip and fall that way. That does not happen. I mean, occasionally they'll hit their head on the back, on the lip of a bathtub, if there's a big bathtub that they're standing in. But you have to look at what happened with Heather, how she fell directly back and flopped. That is your heart stopping. That is your blood pressure going to zero. That is POTS syndrome. When people slip and fall, they put their hands out. They get injured. They get bruises in here and all. That's how humans fall. But when they're unconscious, when they fall, watch what happens. This is how they fall. She's still talking about how Jesus loves her here. So.
Talk about irony in a bit.
I know, right? She'll do anything for a boom. That's no blood pressure.
I hate seeing
Zero
that.
blood pressure. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's
rough.
She's lucky she got out of that. Bob wasn't so lucky. He bled from the inside, but
Exactly. She did too a little bit, but not because she got attention right away. They were able to deal with it. I'm looking for some other information. Do you also have? Oh, here it is. No, I can't find it. Caleb, do you
my
have
vaccination
something like
card?
this called who? No, is it you like who the?
Oh yeah. My special.
Yeah, I'm looking for who the F is Mike Young. Isn't that your special?
Yeah. It's on YouTube. It's called Who the F is Mike Young. It's fun. I think you'll like it.
Tell me about that. Well, Caleb, you did me wrong this time. I didn't get all the information on Mike. I knew I'd read about him. What?
Can't believe I got to send Caleb all my info while I'm on the air.
I'm gonna forward that email to you again, Drew. Susan also didn't get the prep email.
No,
today.
it's not on your stuff. At least I didn't see it on your stuff.
By the way, we're in a Zoom world. It's nobody's fault. But Who the F is Mike Young is a half hour.
Producer.
It's a half-hour show. It stars myself, Chelsea Kane, Marlon Young. It was directed by Kevin Connolly from Entourage, and it's a fun sitcom idea. And I wove my comedy performing at the Beacon Theater. I sort of wove it in with narrative sketches, and so it just turned out to be a really fun special. And it's on YouTube. Who the F is Mike Young? And it's me navigating single life in Hollywood, pre-COVID.
Oh, how funny! Oh boy.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun to shoot.
And when you say comedy's coming back, are you hearing sort of from your colleagues that they're, I don't know, gearing up? The engines are they have a. I mean, a lot of comedy comes from anger and from pain and things like that. And I'm wondering if they're frustrated and angry, and it's going to start flowing.
I don't know if listen, some comics are political comics. They get frustrated at the news at what they see, and that's their act, right? Like comedians are all different, right? You got people who do personal comedy. So I just think they're freed up now, a few years post-COVID, to just understand the freedom is back. Like the woke stuff is kind of done. No one's afraid to say what they want to feel anymore. Give it up to like anyone who, the Bill Burrs of the world who kind of cracked it open for a lot of people. But I think, at least personally myself, I'm just going out there and saying whatever I feel with no fear, because at this point, what's the point of doing the art if you got to be afraid of saying something? You know what I mean?
You know who I think really opened the door for you guys, and I know you've toured with him, but that's Chappelle. And his stuff, in his special that got him in so much trouble, you have to really pay attention to he builds an argument across his hour. And if you just look at excerpts of some of the stuff he says, it can seem a little harsh, but he's making a point. There's a narrative arc to everything he says. And I remember him talking about he was pissed that people didn't pay attention. You have to pay attention to what he's doing.
100%. And Dave is kind of a mad genius. And if you watch the punchline, your mother was a great man. I mean, when he delivered that, all the knee-jerk reactors, they didn't understand the bit. Dave doesn't have hate in his heart for like any group of people. No. He's a pure artist. No. He's kind of might be a genius. So like if you didn't, like you said, if you didn't get it, you're mad at Chappelle, you're going at Chappelle hard. But if you have an open brain and you're smart, you're just like a little smarter and you understand like the human condition, you get that Dave Chappelle is like pretty damn brilliant. Now that doesn't mean I agree with every bit that Dave does. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to agree with every single thing he does, but when it comes to that and that whole attack on him, I'm with Dave 100%. You know what I mean?
We don't have to agree with everybody on anything ever, number one. And number two, Dave is one of those guys, if you have a problem with him, that you're telling me more about you than him.
Right. And it's almost like, remember when you're a kid, and I don't know if you played on sports teams as a kid, but like you'd be on a team, and you got 12 guys on a team. You got Christian dudes, you got a Jewish kid, you got a Middle Eastern kid, you got people that just, you know what I mean? You got every type of kid. And you already learn, hey, we could be friends, but we might not agree on a lot of stuff. And I feel like I learned that as a young kid. I already saw that the teams were kind of a representation of what the bigger world looked like. So, people need to kind of open up. It's okay to, not be okay with your friend's opinion. You don't need to go to war with your buddy over your belief system all the time. That's too much.
A comment that just came in off Twitch that Caleb put up there. Comedians are the modern philosopher. It's no wonder they had to hit them first to spread the big lie over the last 4+ years. They're not just I think when it's funny. It's sort of comedians, stand-up comedians in particular, have sort of taken a really interesting position in our society. They're sort of replacing a little bit where rock stars were. They're also replacing sort of where poets were in an ancient society. And I'll tell you what really drove that home for me was listening to, I used to be a huge Pryor fan, and then occasionally I'll listen to his stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just like it just never gets old. It's poetry. You just can't get old.
He's the number one. I had his 15 CD box set from Warner Brothers. As a kid, I would play that all day long, and you're 100% right. He would hit on every subject, you know what I mean? No fear, take pain and just rewire it into comedy. He was the guy. It's funny because I just watched the Bob Dylan Rolling Thunder documentary. Did you watch that? So you're talking about, kind of like the poets of the, back in the day and comedians. Yeah. And, you don't want to give us too much credit because some comedians, their philosophies are just off. But yes, it's
for sure.
You know what I mean? You can think you're really a philosopher, funny. But your philosophy just might be off.
Yeah.
But yes, the good comedians, I think, are spitting proper philosophy and, deep thinkers. You know, I think Dave's
Yeah.
one of them. I think
Yeah.
Bill's one of them. You know, there's some
but they
deep
deliver
thinkers.
in a way that it's obviously in an entertaining format, but it's a way it makes us think, see things, see a truth the way we might not have seen it or been willing to see it, and it not come wrapped in funny. And people are putting
Yeah.
Carlin's name up here over and over again. Carlin was the first of the sort of the modern genre, I would say, but he was like a commentator more than a poet. I mean, go listen to Pryor, go listen to his stories, go listen to, oh my God, the stories. They're just phenomenal.
Are you kidding? And he could stretch out one bit for like 5 minutes. He would do his Mudbone, or he would do, you know, his friend who got in fights with cops, you know, and he would stretch the whole thing out. He'd go to the jungle and tell you about Africa. It would last 6 minutes. Comics struggle to get a 1 minute bit. You know, he would just just mine it.
So go to I think it's Mudbone and the Voodoo Lady. Go listen to that one, and then go listen to him talk about his vacation in Africa. That's what Mike's talking about. Those are I don't have words to describe them. And if you don't like them for some reason, maybe listen to, there's a lot in there. Keep listening, because it's again one of those things that it's like reading, you know, Homer or something. You may not get it the first time you read it, but you'll see it as you read. Yeah.
He was that deep.
So,
even his bit about when he went to jail, he went to visit the jail. You know, he went to jail and he goes, "Thank God they got penitentiaries." You know what I mean? You'd expect him to go the other way and be like, "Man, there's too many people in jail." He's like, "Oh man, we need jail."
Yeah, he said, "Thank God there's that." But before that, he said, I found justice, because when I went there was just us."
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Pryor's the GOAT.
So again, I agree. Well, listen, Mike, am I missing anything in terms of what's coming up for you? We're going to kind of wrap this up. Oh,
no, man,
another one. You used to do, hang on, you used to do Ferguson. Speaking of brilliant comedians, people do not know how smart Craig Ferguson was, right? I mean, I watched that carefully. So smart. I talked to one of his producers once. You know, he had like Carson, he'd have the cards up with the monologue in front of it. And I saw the cards up there, and I was like, he's not talking about that. And they go, "Yeah, we never know. We hold 3 topics up there. They're completely flushed out. He may go into something completely different." And it feels completely rehearsed. He's so smart.
It's funny, Craig Ferguson, I think he kind of did his thing over here in America. And I'm not sure where he's from. London, England. Where's he from? Scotland?
Yeah, London.
I don't know. I forget where he's from.
Well,
but he lives in a castle. He's more than fine. He was kind enough to put me on his show, and I did a few shows with him, and I saw what a comic he was. Because it's funny, as a talk show host, I actually didn't know his legacy as a stand-up, and then I went and worked with him in stand-up and saw how good he was, how smart he was, how he was on point.
He's also a recovering guy, a severe alcoholic, and he told me the story about how he went to bed after a big bender, and he lived above a bar, I guess, and he said he came down the next morning with a full plan to jump off the top of the Tower Bridge. He was going to kill himself. Some people think that's the London Bridge, it's the Tower Bridge. And he said he went down there, and the bartender was cleaning up, and goes, "Come on, Craig, just one more." And he's like, no, I got something to do. It's like, come on. That guy got him wasted and saved his life.
Wow.
And so, and then he eventually woke up in really shitty circumstances, sort of disgusting circumstances for himself. And he went, "I got to do something about this." And he's been a great recovering guy ever since. So, well, listen, appreciate you coming on here, Mike. It's a pleasure to meet you. I
have one question.
Look forward to, go ahead.
If it's okay if I have to, so you work with a lot of people in recovery, and I always wondered, do you think that more creatives are addicts, or do you believe that there's just as many plumbers, engineers, doctors that are addicts as there are in the entertainment game that are creative heads? Yeah. Because there's always that illusion that, like, oh yeah, the alcohol and the drugs make you funnier, but I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Even though
they
I drink
not make
and
you funnier.
do my thing.
They do not make you funnier, but I have the only published actual research on that question. And
Oh, wow.
it is definitely the case that people that pursue a public life have a higher incidence of addiction and childhood trauma. Not hugely, but by a significant amount. And we were able actually to show that all of this public, performing is a bid to solve the original injuries. Plus, people with alcoholism and addiction tend to be very smart, very creative, very quick, and love intense circumstances like standing up with a microphone, being on stage. So the alcohol and the using and stuff, they just excuse that by saying it makes me funnier. But no. It's the fact that you have this genetics. Oh, that's my study, right?
Is that it? Okay, good.
That's well, we got published all over the place. It was a big headline news and stuff. But in the bowels of that study were these observations that and it makes sense. People and this is why, by the way, why I have an issue with people speaking about addiction pejoratively, because the genetics of addiction has huge positives that comes with it. It's just it has this liability. And the positives to me are spectacular. I mean, you get a Craig Ferguson because of the genes of addiction. That's how Craig Ferguson happens. And so if he were using it, it'd be a problem. He would have some really significant liability there. But to look at it all as just pejorative, I get very upset about that. In fact, by the way,
I'm going to check that study.
When Carolyn Kennedy brought up, we wrote a book about it. We wrote a book called The Mirror Effect about 15 years ago off of that study. But the fact that Carolyn Kennedy went out and said and talked shit about RFK Jr. and his behavior when he was using a drug addict is an offense to every recovering person in this country. Because yes, drug addicts in their disease do horrible stuff. And in order to stay sober and stay clean, their moral compass has got to be spot on. They have to be 100% honest all the time. And they change and they become a different person. But yeah, in their disease, thank you, Carolyn. Well, there's the mirror effect. But she insulted everybody in this country who is in recovery. So, but good question, Mike. I appreciate it very much. And we will look for stealing jokes. We will look for who the F is Mike Young, and look for the Rock Comedy Tour coming near you. Just go to MikeYoungLive.com for dates, right?
Yeah. And you can go to Rock Comedy Tour as well. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, man. Have fun in Connecticut.
Thank you.
The cold, the ice. All right. So, Caleb, are you okay to play a break here? You think things are working?
I'm sweating here, but we're going to try it. Everything else is working fine. Well, it just doesn't want to play any video packages. And before Susan asks, yes, I did restart the PC before we started the show, and I restarted it between the shows, so it's not the PC.
Well, Susan's driving down to see her granddaughter. You got her off the hook for a minute. Though she might well call you on the road.
She's probably listening in the car, though. Yeah.
I know. And so if we do glitch, I want to go ahead and mention the next guy with us, Curtis Houck. He's a managing editor of NewsBusters, media analyst, over a decade of experience, Media Research Center. Much like we were talking about what happened to comedians, I'm going to talk to Curtis about what happened to journalists. He was at the Heritage Foundation as an intern. He you can get more about him at mrc.org and also on X, Curtis Houck, Houck. And we'll be right back with Curtis, hopefully after a couple minutes of tape here. Well, you've heard me praise.
Well,
I'll tell you what.
I
will talk about both. I will talk about Paleo Valley because I will do. It's Paleo Valley and Fatty, right? Those are our two today.
Yes.
Or is it also TWC?
Paleo Valley and the Wellness Company. It's Paleo Valley and the Wellness Company today.
Not Fatty.
Fatty was done earlier.
It didn't roll. It didn't go through.
Well, darn it.
We didn't do Fatty. So let me do all three. I will do all three because I am. I'll tell you why. I can do this because I am lucky enough to have three wonderful sponsors who I am committed to, who I might use their products all the time, who I'm delighted to have supporting this program. And I'm even more happy that you guys are a motivated, supportive audience that support them because they are worth it. So TWC, of course, amongst other things, I'm going to get you their field kit, which is This is their Big Daddy kit. You can get this with a telehealth visit. Literally anything you could need in any kind of an emergency is available in this kit. I don't know if you can kind of see how packed it is, including the EpiPen, which we get at a great price. Inhalers, everything. Everything is in this kit. And it's in sort of a, I don't know that this is bomb-proof, but it looks like it should be. The Wellness Company, I'm on the medical board there. We have a great board of professionals. We're just trying to do good to keep people informed, keep people have access. We've learned that the government overreaches, right? During COVID, they locked us down so we couldn't get the medication we wanted. You were forbidden from getting it or forbidden from seeing doctors, which is the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. We have telehealth. We have guidebooks for use of these medication. Telehealth backup is always there. And during the fires, I learned again that government failure puts my family at risk, and I was glad to have had this field kit here. So, TWC, doctor.com/TWC. Now, Fatty 15 is, you saw, unfortunately, you aren't going to see the interview that I do with Stephanie, who's the veterinarian who discovered Fatty. She discovered she was taking care of the Navy's dolphins. Navy has a fleet of dolphins. She discovered that the dolphins who had a deficiency in pentadecanoic acid got medical illnesses just like ours, including Alzheimer's. She replaced it. They didn't get it. And we have the same stuff. It's the first nutritional deficiency syndrome in something like 50 years. It causes something called the cellular fragility syndrome, which is a syndrome of essentially the oxidized, our cell membranes can become oxidized, and they're fragile when they're there, and they're aged, and they break down, and they have senescence. When they do break down, they bring in inflammatory cells. It's part of the aging process, and you can reduce that cellular aging and prevent it with Fatty 15. I take it every day. I make the family take it every day. That's doctor.com/Fatty15. And again, I'm going to have a store set up here soon through TWC, where I'll be providing this and other products that are for longevity and wellness. That I'm kind of the golden age of this stuff. But Fatty is right in the middle of it. She has a new book coming out called The Longevity Nutrient, I think it's called. And that book is so well written and so well laid out. You will be really up to speed on the oxidative state of the longevity nutrient, and the oxidative state of cells and why that's such an important thing to stay on top of however you do so. But the cellular membrane is a big piece of it. Fatty goes at that. And then finally, with TWC, Fatty, whom did I miss?
Paleo Valley.
Paleo Valley, which let's see if I have anything of their stuff. I just had a huge glass of the grass-fed finished beef bone broth made from bones, not hides. Doctor.com/Paleo Valley. Susan and I live on this stuff. The beef sticks, the chicken sticks. I think I've decided I like the chicken sticks best, and they're only like 60 calories. All these things are very low calorie, high nutrient dense. They also the superfood bar. I'm not used to talking about it, so I forget the name of it. But I was looking at the ingredients in that. I'm like, oh my God, these are great supplements, and again, low calorie. And the bone broth is a key ingredient in the superfood bars. I forget what flavor. I had the lemon, I think it was, and it was just. And for me, as much as being nutrient dense, they are great ways to manage your appetite if you're trying to lose weight and you're trying to maintain muscle mass. Don't forget, sarcopenia is the enemy of aging. You want to maintain your muscle mass with resistance training, but you got to have enough protein, high quality protein, preferably, to be able to maintain that muscle mass. And we have spoken to the Autumn, the brains behind Paleo Valley, and she is lovely. You've seen some interviews with her. And we're just delighted to have her on this team and to be doing the work for us of sourcing, first of all, doing very responsible farming, or only working with responsible farms, and then sourcing these great fermented products for us. Okay, that's we don't need the
well done.
We don't need the rolled in pieces anymore.
Like a real
without
professional.
A prompter, without a because thank God these are people that support us, that I support them because their products are just exceptional. I feel so grateful and it's nice to have that, and as opposed to talking about something I don't really believe in or I don't think is the greatest product. These are really good. We've been blessed with that pretty much all the way along, so we're thankful for that. All right, let's bring in Curtis Houck, managing editor of NewsBusters and media analyst with a decade experience at Media Research Center. Curtis, sorry I had to sit through my little diatribe there, but I appreciate you being here.
Pleasure to be with you, Dr. Drew.
So I was speaking to Mike Young before, comedian. My sort of central question with him was what happened to comedians during COVID? Where were they? I kept asking, where are you guys? Why aren't you? You should be making fun of this. I thought comedians went at, sort of at least people in authority made fun of them, or at least went at people in positions of power, which certainly is what I always thought journalists did, or at least they always said they did. And then all of a sudden, I see the journalists are, in fact, now we're learning, they are paid by the government to toe the government line. And it's just an astonishing thing. Maybe it's not astonishing to you, but it is to the average person.
Yeah, just to take a high altitude view of things about what is wrong with the media, I think it comes down to hubris. It comes down to arrogance. When you think of journalism and the journalism classes that I took in high school and my friends that have been in journalism, at its fundamental core, when you are delivering the news, you're trying to answer the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's what a news story should contain. That it should be clear and concise to anybody who's tuning in or reading you. And instead, what we've come to see here is it's more about a political narrative. It's about a political agenda. It's about entertainment value, at least in their minds, about what they think is entertaining. So I think that's really where things have gone awry. And at least in my decade plus experience here, many journalists have shown publicly, some privately, but not many, an aversion to outside criticism, as if you couldn't raise questions about, hey, well, why wasn't this included in this? Shouldn't you guys have to apologize for some of the things that were going on with the Russian collusion hoax about President Trump in his first term? Shouldn't you guys have to apologize about the things that have been going on with COVID, especially in the early days? Shouldn't you guys have to apologize about what was going on with the Hunter Biden laptop and Politico, which we can get into as well, with Politico being in the news today? And they've shown no desire to do that whatsoever. No need to return Pulitzer Prizes for Russian probe stories. No desire to apologize for their interference in the 2020 election regarding censorship on social media platforms. And no desire now to apologize for what's been going on, as we learned today, with USAID and Politico subscriptions. It's a hubris.
But hang on. I want to stop you because Caleb is telling me there's an update on that story. Is that correct? I want to make sure we're accurate as long as we're holding everybody else's hand to the fire.
What Curtis is saying is that is the update to the story. It looked like there was money from USAID going directly to Politico, but what came out is that it was actually a very large number of subscriptions, so that pretty much everybody up on the Hill would receive, subscriptions to Politico, paid for with our tax dollars, by the way. So I'd like one of those subscriptions. But thanks, guys.
It's a racket. It's kind of a racket where it's Politico Pro. They don't even really necessarily advertise the direct cost of these subscriptions. It's one of those, we'll talk and then we'll figure out kind of what we're trying to offer here. It's content behind a paywall, and it's talking to people today. Hill offices would often justify it by saying, well, we read it because they name drop people that we need to know about, or at least get cited by themselves to feel good about, and it's to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars at some of these government agencies. And the point is, if we're trying to trim fat, it's it's one thing to have a copy of the New York Times or Washington Post delivered to your office, but it's another thing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to read articles that you may or may not read on a daily basis.
Right. And I want to know if this is the part that's astonishing to me, and I don't know the answer to it, but it looks to me like, even you mentioned all the excesses and all the things they got wrong and all the insane campaigns they went on, and you said there was no apology, which there has been none. Not anybody anywhere. Even people like Chris Cuomo are being called out by Dave Smith. You get defensiveness and sort of excuses at best. But my question is, because I don't interact that much with journalists, my question is, do they, in their heart of hearts, think about it and reflect on it and recognize how wrong they were and think, I wonder if I would, I may better be more careful next time. Or is it hubristic to the point that they just don't give a shit?
I think for a lot of them, they don't care. They do not care at all. And I think maybe even worse, it doesn't occur to some of them, that they legitimately
Curtis,
think
I want to, because
right.
I really want to drill on this. I want to drill on this. What do they tell themselves? Do they just tell themselves, well, we're delivering lots of news, we're going to get a certain amount wrong, that's just the way it goes, the nature of the business. They just defend. I mean, my desire is to wake them up from their slumber. And I'm wondering, if I knew exactly the defensive strategies they were using, I could kind of go at it a little bit.
And these people are in denial, I think, too. They would say, the facts changed, or we didn't know this then, so really we weren't wrong, so we don't have anything to apologize for. We see this, we all know people in our personal lives that exhibit these kinds of behaviors, except it's nearly an entire industry that's doing this. That's the rub. That's the unfortunate part that we see going on here. I also think it is performative for some people, unfortunately. You talk to some of these people privately and they're good. They seem like good people, but the light goes on and they've got their narratives of the day to push their crazy chyrons and away they go. But then when things turn, the lights are off, they're, friends with the person that they were just yelling at.
So I had an intern over at CNN once who was a very bright woman, and she was going to Columbia Journalism School. And I was sort of ragging on journalists. I said, I can't even get them to grab onto a basic understanding of some of the things I'm trying to say in my field. They just don't know a lot about anything, and they behave as though they know a lot about everything. And she goes, how can you say that? I go, they're experts in literally nothing. I mean, you have to have been an expert in something to understand what it feels like, what's required to develop an expertise. They don't have that almost ever. I mean, Sanjay Gupta had that, but I don't know that he calls himself, did he have journalist training at all? I mean, I would never call myself a journalist, even though I was at HLN. I was hosting a talk show. That's what I was doing on a news program. I have my expertise, and I brought that to the talk show. And most of these shows are, in fact, let's face it, they're just talk shows. But they would never think of themselves that way, but that's what they are. But she said to me something that stayed with me to this day. She goes, but in my, I forget the context of the conversation, but she said that the professor just kept hammering on them. What's the story? How do you find a story in this? Where's the story in this? And I thought, oh my God, in science, a story is almost always bullshit. Biology doesn't work in a story. It works like trying to create a story about a cloud. You can't create stories about clouds. And these are probabilistic chemical equations that move in a certain direction based on the laws of thermodynamics. That's the story. And I thought, shit, if they insist on a story, they're going to get reality wrong the vast majority of the time. Help me understand. Am I getting that right? Is that something that they are mandated to do? And is that why it's so far from reality?
Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes you follow a string to the end, and it's not like a movie.
That's right.
Life is not, like a linear movie. Like I always thought in grade school when we'd have to diagram a book or diagram, some event about it perfectly builds up to the climax, and then it goes back down and reaches the resolution.
Yes, I know what you're talking
life
about.
Life is so much messier than, the theme. So much, life is so much messier than that. And I always hated that kind of crap because it's not like that. Life is not always linear. And with the news business, sometimes you follow a story. Sometimes, with us at NewsBusters, when we study the media from a quantitative basis, totaling the minutes and seconds, we may set out to look at and study X. And we may think we're going to find a huge disparity, like we're going to get some 20 times disparity. And we may end up publishing something where it's only 3 times is, the split between the others. And That's okay. And I think that's what the journalism profession is missing, some level of humility. And you make this point about the rule of experts. This is the Tom Nichols issue of things, believing in a rule of experts. But journalists believe that they are experts about everything. Yes, there's health reporters. Yes, there's military reporters. But do they have any previous military experience? Like, what are their qualifications?
Right.
But then the flip side, though, is when when we the people try to get involved in news gathering operations, or we try to report what is going on in our neighborhoods and at our school boards, say, hey, you guys are engaging in some funny business. You guys aren't being fully transparent with us. They get all high-minded on themselves. They climb their high horse, high on themselves, and say, no. Do you have a journalism degree? How can you ask those questions? It's like, oh, we are the taxpayers too, just like you are as well.
It does feel like the government of the people for the people is returning slowly to the people. At least the encumbrances are being lifted up a little bit. But did you know all this was going on? That what Elon Musk is uncovering with his computer sleuth, her digital sleuths?
I had pretty high hopes, and I think he's delivering. I think he does. That he's going methodically.
No, my question is, did you know all these things he's uncovering? Did you have any idea that this was all going on? I mean, this is a shock. Yeah. This is a shock to my system.
I definitely did. I mean, we at the Media Research Center, one of our other sister site, CNS News, when I was an intern there in the summer of 2013, one of the things that website was really known for was uncovering and just, the editors there taught us how to go on, the National Science Foundation, NIH, USAID, and just put in the craziest key terms for grants. And eventually, the one story that sticks with me was, $5 million or something like that was spent out of one of the UC schools, I believe, studying why illegal immigrants deported back to Mexico, why men in particular were frequenting Tijuana strip clubs and seeking out prostitutes. Why were they engaging in such rank levels of sex with prostitutes? Well, it was because they were depressed about their circumstances, and that was just shocking. And I would see stories like that week after week after week when we would come to our Monday morning editorial meetings, and it's strange credulity that you think of the craziest set of circumstances and think of the most vile things and just put it in search terms for these government agencies. And sure enough, you'll find that money was probably spent on something. So when they talk about money in Nepal for this or condoms for Gaza or those different sorts of things, it definitely is true and it's possible. And the media always come back to us now, Dr. Jerry, and say, oh, no. What about entitlements or the defense budget? Those things, that would make the real difference. Yes, that is true. But you do have to start somewhere, and you have to start trimming things that I think a lot of people generally agree with is, why is our government spending money on things that have nothing to do with we the people? And just about your last thing too about the First Amendment, that's my biggest gripe about all of this. A reminder to the viewers out there and the listeners, the First Amendment applies to all of us, not just the news media.
That's right. At all times. And there's a cultural, ethical standard above and beyond the constitutional legal standard. And people that people keep advocating, let the government. It's like, there is a public sphere. And Alexis de Tocqueville warned us in 1828 that if we did not maintain our speech in the public space, we would have the least access to free speech, even though the highest granted in the law, the actuality in least in terms of practice, because of something he called the effect of the public square, I think he called it, which is cancel culture, essentially, and scapegoating and all the things we've been engaged in. Yeah. He did not imagine social media, which is where this has reached a pitch and evolved to a point that it's hard to imagine, but here we are. So what's to be done? I'm shocked. It's shocked that no previous administration thought of paying attention to how our money's being used. The managerial revolution, the managerial class has expanded to the point that it's a bureaucratic disaster and they think they run the government and they're not here to serve the people. It's really, is this the bottom? Is this the crisis point? Do we restore our government? And if so, how? I know you're a journalist, but I'm asking you a big question.
Yeah. No, yeah. I just, first, your point about these bureaucrats, their pushback is no one elected Elon Musk. We didn't vote for Donald Trump or whatever. Yeah. Well, who do you answer to? Oh, we answer to the American people. It's kind of this vague, esoteric thing that just kind of floats in the ether.
They never do. They never do. They run things to the way they see fit for them.
Yeah, their argument is that, oh yes, because of expertise, we need to be able to stay in office through different administrations. And yeah, maybe there's truth to that about the park rangers know the ins and outs of Yellowstone, obviously, if you're just rotating through every year. But I think what we do here is continue to trust in what they're doing. This is exactly the approach that is needed. This is so desperately needed, Dr. Drew. You notice in the Washington, D.C. economy that it did not suffer the way this country did in 2008, the way this country did during COVID economically. I learned this the hard way trying to buy. My wife and I trying to buy. We could afford a house in literally anywhere in the country. The Washington Post a couple times a year would do this thing about, well, what does $400,000 get you? In New York City and DC and LA, it'll get you a shoebox, but you literally go most other places and you can get all these big things. 6 of the top 10 counties consistently year after year are the areas around Washington, D.C. and just above north and south of Washington, D.C. So you could kind of get close to Baltimore. What do they have in common? It's government money. It's government contracts. It's government IT jobs. It's defense contractors. All of this waste and bloat needs to be trimmed. There needs to be a chainsaw taken to these budgets. As Secretary Hegseth pointed out, the Pentagon hasn't done an audit in I don't know how long of its own budget. The military, about where this money, every cent is going, they haven't done an audit of it, which is just absolutely remarkable. Whereas we, the taxpayers, the government expects us, this is coming into tax season, the government, comes in after us for every dollar and cent that it can find that was attributed to us. But when it comes to our tax dollars, they do not do that as well. It sounds so cheesy that what we're talking about here, but it just hasn't been done, and neither party has really respected this. Donald Trump is now empowering people that will do this, and if this were just a dictatorship, Donald Trump would be doing all of this himself, but he's bringing in experts and people that he trusts and are experts in IT and space and budgeting to figure this stuff out. And I think that's should be welcome. And we're only, a few weeks into this.
I know. And by the way, the idea, a dictatorial centralized authority is about taking power for him or herself.
Right.
While what's happening here is unloading power and saving our money, giving it back to us so it's not going to Washington. It is the opposite of dictator, the opposite. So do you have recommendations for people? Is it, should we just not, I've stopped by newspapers. I've stopped watching a lot of news on TV, but I still do collect a lot of my news from Substacks and X and various outlets. Is that the move? We should all do that? Or are there people we should support, people we should attack? What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're going to, NewsBusters still engage in all of those forms of media, so you don't have to. Number one, just a shameless plug. Number two, I think the internet is always going to be a net positive, further empowering free speech and empowering the individual to seek out experts, whether they are classically trained reporters or people who've just kind of become activists over time, learning about certain issues and people that they trust, whether it's about COVID or education, being able to seek those out on Substack, here on, places like your show, things like other platforms such as Rumble and X and the expansion that those platforms have allowed. I think it's worth taking in a large, wide swath of a media diet. I do think it's important to look at folks that you do disagree with, but trust but verify. You know, I go back to like the early
Always.
2010s with Glenn Beck.
Right.
Trust but verify.
Yeah. I agree. What's on the crosshairs at NewsBusters? What's coming up?
Yeah, we're a big part of the push to defund PBS and NPR. My boss, Tim Graham, who's been studying this since 1989, has a new story out about 5 reasons why PBS and NPR need to be defunded. We're looking at the FCC raw video that they received from CBS News about Kamala Harris. And I've been looking at the White House press briefings under Caroline Leavitt and the new faces in there that are doing a good job or continuing to engage in more of the same nonsense.
Caroline Leavitt's doing a pretty good job, seems to me.
Yeah.
And I know the biggest criticism she gets is that she's too attractive, which is really people, and from women saying that, they should really, really think about what they're saying when they say shit like that. But anything particularly, yeah. Any place you want to direct people to for the Kamala Harris yet? Have you watched yet? Is there a certain moment we should zero in on?
Well, it's just jarring to actually see the raw video of how it was spliced together. It did end up that, they took the one answer from here and they moved it up to here. And just the beginning is just really awkward, the banter between the two of them before he officially started asking her questions. There's 2 different angles out there, by the way. There's one where the camera's looking just at her, and then there's one that's looking at Bill Whitaker from CBS. So I think that's kind of fun to look at too. The FCC is right to engage in this. They say that this is overreach, but if you are a broadcaster, radio or one of the networks that you could get via the old school rabbit ears, you have a higher set of responsibilities.
No, you're essentially you're broadcasting at the pleasure of the American people, and particularly the current government. It's not free airway. It's a granted airway, and there's a bunch of responsibilities attached to that. All right,
it's way different
I will
than
go look at
what
that.
we do.
Yes, this is a very different thing. This is in terms of what's
illegal
mandated of us. Yeah, the mandates. And if they want to change those mandates, fine. I mean, maybe to keep up with this, I get that, but that's not the way it is now. It's not the way people look at it at all. At all. Those are government airways. And the government belongs to us, and so those are our airways. All right, my friend, good to talk to you. NewsBusters, we'll look for you there, and also on X, Curtis Houck, Houck. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Dr. Drew. Thank you.
You betcha. Coming up, Caleb, I think you can play this, right? There should be something we can toss up there. There we go.
Yes.
At noon tomorrow, I'm going to speak to Beatrice Rosen. She was in Charmed, I think. Actress, she's French. I heard her on a French radio show. And she has ras-le-bol, as they say. She's had it. And she's pissed, and she's calling people out. And I just thought she was interesting. And it's interesting to get that European perspective on us, particularly for somebody that understands this country and speaks perfect English. Next Tuesday, Dr. Patrick Soon-Chong. He is the LA Times owner who has seemed to have done a complete about-face on his, I don't want to say his politics, but who he supports in terms of the politicians. I want to get his thoughts on that. Jimmy Dore, Dr. Robert Epstein, Robbie Starbuck coming in, Ethan Haim, attorney Marcella Burke. We got a lot of interesting guests coming up. If you have suggestions, you can go to contact@drdrew.com. We want to, this is what you want. That's what we want to provide. I mean, if you guys are interested in it, I'm watching you on the Restream and over on the Rumble Rants too. If there's something you guys want to toss up there, I will look for those. I'm not seeing anything coming up on the stream right now. In fact, there it is. Okay. And Caleb, what happened to our system today? I don't mind it at all.
I've been researching and figuring it out because we had this issue 3 weeks ago, and I thought it was all totally fixed. And it's something to do. I got to get either a new hard drive or something on this because it's like a year old of a PC. But we put it through a lot, Drew. Like we put this PC to work.
I know.
So.
I get it. Core physics. I see your recommendation of David Martin. We have had him on the show. It may be time to get him back. We can talk to Emily about that. I know I've been seeing his threads lately and his interesting point of view. And we appreciate you all being here. We appreciate supporting the people that support us. Do check out Susan's show today. It was very interesting. It was different. We had a lot of TMZ style material towards the end there with someone reporting on Kanye. And I think, what did Susan say? She got agitated by Kanye's behavior. It agitated her. And that's exactly what happened. I witnessed it. She was agitated about it. So again, we appreciate you being here. We'll see you next Tuesday, 3 o'clock. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll see you tomorrow at noon. Be with me tomorrow at noon, please, for Beatrice Rosen. I think you will find that conversation very interesting. And then also next Tuesday at 3, that's when Dr. The LA Times owner comes in here, and we will have that conversation. Let me make sure. Nope. Caleb, I'm seeing something different on my schedule. Is that just
on my
schedule that way?
Which day?
On Tuesday, the 11th.
That's
I want
Dr.
to make
Patrick.
sure that
If I have this.
That's what I thought. There it is. Now
that's
it's
him.
on there. I see it. It's one of my posts. It has that. There he is. Okay, that's one you guys just do not want to miss. That should be very interesting. And I'll watch the restream and try to get your guys' questions up in front of him. If you have particular things you want to talk about, we'll get to that. And check out Beatrice Rosen tomorrow. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis,